Welcome everyone. My name is Lee Ming Stroh. I am the co-founder and CEO of Master the World. So lovely to have all of you here. This is our 11th webinar and our 13th kit. So I hope that if it's your first kit with us, you'll enjoy it. Definitely answer some surveys and feedback, or let us know in the chat what you're thinking. Any questions at all, please don't be afraid to ask. On the screen, you'll see here, we have 3 different modes. If things are going a little fast and you're like, whoa, I can't keep up with how fast you guys are going, and you want to go at any point in time to go through the entire tasting list, there is a third mode called Reveal the Wine Profile, Reveal Wine Profiles. If you put in 115A, you'll be revealing all of the information we have about this particular wine, including a link to where you can buy them if it's available on Wine Searcher. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists. Again, thank you everyone for being here today to Kit 115A. First up, Evan Goldstein, my business partner, Master Sommelier from San Francisco. Evan?
Yeah, just hello to everybody. For those of you who are with us on a recurring basis, great to see you and have you with us again. For those of you who are first timers, especially thrilled to have you with us as well too. And just last thought, this is our 13th kit, and I actually just tasted our first kit about 2 weeks ago to check in on it. And hopefully none of you have the first kit put it in your cellar for a long time. But if you did, I promise you, you would be pleasantly surprised because the wines are all holding up beautifully. And then also I want to make a point of the fact that if you don't know what the wine, if you don't have the wines in front of you, the way we talk about the wines, think about it like that old game, What's My Line? When you get clues about the person, you try and decide what is it that they actually do. In this case, you get clues about it, try to figure out what the wine is. That's it. That's it for me.
And a second panelist we have today is Madeline Truffaut, Master Sommelier out of Detroit, Michigan. Madeline?
It's my favorite time of year here in the Midwest. It's cool, there's a blue sky, the sun is shining. It's just glorious walking weather before it turns humid. I'm thrilled to be here with you. I love you all, first timers, medium timers, and elder timers like me, right? And we're going to, I take this as an opportunity to taste great wine with you, and frankly, to share what I'm perceiving, and especially if you're going through an exam process, to maybe unravel the nerves a little bit and make it the process accessible. So hello to everyone.
Third and not least, Tim Gazer from New Mexico, Master Sommelier.
Hey everybody, hope you're keeping safe and well. So, talking spring weather, in New Mexico here, it's identity crisis because last weekend it was almost 70 degrees and I looked up last night and it was snowing. So if anything, it's windy, really windy in the spring in New Mexico. And yes, we have a lot of tumbleweeds. So anyway, but looking forward to the tasting today. Beforehand, the 3 of us were talking about this group of wines, and the wines are all showing really well. And there is really so much to talk about with these 6 wines. So looking forward to it.
And I want to just let everyone know, if you want to stay on after the first 90 minutes of this webinar, we are going to stay on for half an hour or more. We had a great time with those of you who did come to the last month's happy half hour after the show. So we're going to stay on, and we are actually going to also make all of you panelists, if you stay on, so that you have the option to share your video and show us who you are. It is so weird to be talking out to space where we don't see your faces, and it's hard when we have so many people on a webinar, but if you do stay, we will be on. And if you can't do it this time, maybe next time. And again, thank you so much for being here. Without further ado, we're going to start with wine 1. And I had a special request for all our speakers today that we're going to go through it a little bit differently. As we go through this grid, which I know a lot of you are very familiar with right now, there's so many overwhelming things on a grid. I asked our speakers to really zone in on some of the things that call their attention when they're going through this grid today.
Well, and
so Madeline,
the first wine is mine, yay. And I will say, if you have any questions that you don't have time or forget to put in the chat room, if you are able to join us in our little afterglow session, you can share those questions with us then. And we live for the questions you don't want to ask. So that said, okay, wine number one. And I did taste this about an hour ago. I'm retasting it with you, and my temperature is not cold, it's cool. So first of all, again, taking Li Meng's lead, when I look at this, I'm not going to read the grid, but what strikes me is it's yellow. It's not straw. There are no green glints to it. And there's also a weight to it in the glass as I move it. So I remark upon that. I'm not going to cling to that and start concluding right now. I'm simply observing that the wine has a specific color. It's yellow, verging on deep yellow in my glass, and it's got a viscosity as I move it. And just to remind us all, when we're describing all these characteristics, we are, linking nose and palate together. We're not separating them. So for me, and I'm taking one quick sip, the first thing that strikes me, especially aromatically, is how expressive this is. And it's a combination of citrus fruit, tree fruit, and flowers. And the mouthfeel is very special on this wine. So hold that thought. In terms of citrus fruit, it's ripe citrus. It's not tart citrus. So I love the Meyer lemon option. And in terms of tree fruit, I'd even add golden pears in here. There's not a tartness to the tree fruit, and even maybe green/bosc pears. Stone fruit is showing very much in this particular tasting to me. Nectarine, even peachy. And then, I hop on down to the floral component because that really is leading here along with the perfectly ripe stone fruit and citrus fruit. And I think it's a combination of fresh and dried flowers. And I'd add more to the little laundry list here, even something expressive like lily. It's very pretty, and it's giving. It's not restrained. Next slide. The things that are striking me at this, go down to other vegetable, that ginger root character, because it's got almost an illusion of sweetness. And I'd even add like a honeyed character there. And then down to herbal, again, citrus herbal. So verbena, lemongrass, sorrel, you get the idea. And it very much ties into the citrus element that's on the palate as well. I am just beelining to inorganic minerality with this. There's undertone of a rockiness to it. It's not overt, but if you were to remove it, it would be like a hole in the wine. It's such an important part of this wine. Oak aging, very interesting. We're saying no, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was some used oak in this because the wine is very relaxed. And remember, the use of larger or neutral barrels can do that to the wine. On the oxidation nuttiness character, there's one that's not mentioned here. I'm sorry, I'm rewriting the grid, but almonds, because I get that as well, almost like an almond or almond milk character. So the nuts can be, specific to oxidation, or they can simply be a flavor component. Perceived winemaking choices. I would bet Ultrabucks there's, significant lees contact in this wine because it's got mouthfeel. It's rich, it's smooth. It has the effect of almost softening the acidity, which, by the way, if you pay attention, is not inconsiderable. My mouth is watering, but still the word I'm thinking of is lush. No residual sugar, but an illusion of sweetness from the ripe fruit. Medium to medium plus acidity. Yes, alcohol, I don't perceive it, so balanced. No phenolics, meaning it's not bitter in any respect. The finish is long. The texture, we're claiming it lean and tart, but my little PS in invisible ink is smooth and round and balanced. Complexity, I'd even make it long. This is a high quality wine. It's round, it's giving, it's balanced. We can go right to the next slide, Li Meng. Which grape variety? Because this is where we start playing with the deduction, right? Look at the options you're given. And Li Meng's going to put a poll up, right, Li Meng?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, work on that enthusiastically so we can reveal it quickly. But I'm going to talk through this. You've got Chenin Blanc, which is what's the thumbprint of Chenin? Semi-aromatic, high-acid white grape. Sauvignon Blanc, highly aromatic white grape variety that tends to have, prominent levels of acidity. Garganega, I had to remind myself, it's not Garganega today because I use Greek pronunciation, it's Garganega. It's a grape variety that's, look at your options, what region, for all practical purposes, exclusively in Italy. And it tends to be more of a lesser aromatic grape variety, right? So it's not going to jump out of the glass with specific aromatics. So you've got, 2 Old World and 2 New World options. And don't forget that Chenin can, soar in South Africa. But when you're looking at these, pull back, look at the overview, and start thinking of the mouthfeel, the acidity levels. How aromatic is this wine in terms of Chenin and Sauvignon Blanc? And when you think of Garganega, maybe channel the best expression of it as opposed to, inexpensive Soave.
Obviously, it's one of the first 3 varieties. I actually think that we talked about, should we tuck something, the right answer, and other, and I just don't think that's fair. But if you picked other, we put that out there so that you can actually put in what else you thought it was, so that we can help you sort of decipher between why not that particular variety and the right one.
And to your point, Li Meng, I'm interrupting just to remind everyone, because you're explaining it so beautifully. This is a safe zone where you can deduce, in a relaxed way, as opposed to being in a manic state of what is it? Perhaps why not that?
We're going to end the poll right now and share the results. This is where we're at. A lot of you got the Garganega. That is amazing. But also, we've got a lot of people, half the people almost went with the Chenin. So I think we will reveal, and then we'll come back to why not certain things. And I think it goes with the territory. Old World France had a 40%. So Madeline, talking about Garganega and where it's from might be also, and where Chenin Blanc is from is also going to be very helpful.
No, absolutely. And looking at this, I think it's a remarkably balanced poll, and that's cool. This wine, by the way, is not obvious. This wine requires deduction. So it is indeed Garganega. It is indeed Soave Classico. It's from a stunning producer, Inama. I don't work for them. I get to say that dispassionately. And also for a crew. So this is, we were chatting about this. This is, not your mommy's inexpensive, drugstore Soave purchased 20 years ago. This is a leader in the region. It is 100% this grape variety. Which is unusual because it's other grape varieties are allowable in it, including, drumroll, Sauvignon Blanc. This is a producer in the heart of the zone, the Classico zone. If you look at the label, by the way, I have to tell you, and this is not to do with deduction, but this represents the contemplative face of love. And this is the more profane face of inebriation, just FYI. And I just found that out today, which I thought was interesting. In terms of why this wine is showing the way it's showing and what it is, I think a lot of it is mouthfeel and the fact that it is expressive aromatically, but it is not an aromatic that speaks to a varietal. Garganega to me is, low on the natural aromatic scale. It tends to be classically from great producers about flowers, about citrus, ripe citrus, about almonds, and certainly about a minerality. This is grown on volcanic soils, and also it's from a warmer pocket of the region, which, maybe softens the acidity level and makes it a little bit more expressive as well. I think, the quality level of this wine actually takes it beyond what classic, even classic excellent Soave is. Tim or Evan, would you agree with me on that point?
I think it speaks to a couple things. One, it speaks to the singularity of place. I mean, most Soaves are made at higher yield levels, oftentimes from the flatlands of the appellation and not on the hillside of Classico where the crews are. But it speaks to a single crew, and within the Soave Classico hillside, if you will, a grand cru at that. Foscarino is a terrific one. And I think the combination of lower yields, the descriptions that you gave it wonderfully, and again, treating this wine with the aplomb it deserves with that extended lees contract gives it almost a Burgundian sense of richness and seriousness to it.
It's fleshy, actually. That word just occurred to me. But I would be surprised if you were stumped by this. If you gave this to me blind, I probably would be, and I'd back into it.
You know, this is a combination of place, a great site for it, the soil, you know, low yields, old vines, and just, you know, to use a geeky term, dry extract, just the intensity and viscosity of the wine from the quality of the fruit. It's just, I think it's just a fantastic wine.
But you know what? Why not Chenin Blanc is something we should address quickly before we pivot away from this wine. You know, to me, why not Chenin? I don't think the acidity is piercing enough. I don't think, you know, the mouthfeel has a lot to do with Chenin to me, particularly French Chenin, you know, Loire Chenin, as opposed to South Africa that can incarnate in different ways. And the aromatics, you know, it doesn't have that undefinable wet wool character that almost comes off like almost musty. You know, and that is a thumbprint of Loire Valley Chenin to me. So it's subtle differences, but I think the mouthfeel is the biggie.
One last question, then we're going to move. Lisa has a great point. For someone looking for a change in their regular glass of Chardonnay, would you suggest this? Reminds her of a Chardonnay, but maybe a little different. What did you think, Madeline?
I think so. I think if anything, it would be closer to Chardonnay. Frankly, you chilled it a little bit more, you know, to pull back on the lushness of it. But whoever made the Roussan Marsan comment, you know, those wines that are, you know, semi-aromatic, have a richness to them that this wine has as well, and are also alternatives, in my opinion, to Chardonnay. I think, you know, you would tell someone that who liked New World Chardonnay that there's no overt, if any, oak on this, and someone who liked, you know, Chablis, that it wasn't quite as sleek and rocky. So you'd have to midwife it slightly, but sure.
Great. Great. All right, we're going to go on to wine number 2. Evan, you're up next.
So let's move on to the second wine. The second wine is a nice counterpoint to the first wine, whereas you have the sort of richness and expression in that first glass. This one's a little bit more, I don't want to say subdued, but sort of pushed back and pushed forward. Color-wise here, sort of a nice medium straw color is right. Yellow to me always has more intensity and depth to it, as the first wine did. The second one's just a little pushed back. So a light yellow and a medium straw can often be perceived in the same way. But a little touch of green there on the backbone, which always is a suggestion to me of either youth in the wine or a cool climate in the wine, or a combination of both, but pretty straightforward there. With respect to the aromatics, a couple of things jump out to me. In terms of talking about the fruit, it is again in a sort of citrusy vein thing here, although not necessarily as well spelled out. I'm getting the angularity and sharpness of fruits that are sort of right at that edge of ripeness, whether it's citrus fruit, tree fruit, or even some of the cool, the tropical fruits that you see there, but not ripe, not boozy, not blousy, not forward, sort of riding that perfect edge of being just ripe, with again the citrus and particularly some of the zest and the stuff closer to the peel being more suggestive to me today than the actual flesh of that. And I might say that to be true of even the apples, more apple skin than apple, and some of those other tree fruits a little bit more towards the edge of the fruit and not towards the fruit proper. Again, some nice floral components, but the florals here speak simply reflective of the kind of fruit that they pick up here. So since the lemon, limey, citrusy thing jumps out to me today, the blossoms sort of echo and validate that more in the back. And again, sort of the softer apple blossoms is there too. And once again, sort of everything just sort of fresh, ripe, perfect, not over the top. Then with respect to other elements that are there, I am sort of struck by a combination of some of these other elements. And again, very much like Madeline's first wine that she talked to about with the Soave, this sort of very strong presence of earth in this wine. So nothing sort of green there. I'm not picking anything up there, but I am picking up, once again, all sorts of interesting subtle herbal things, particularly. I think today, chervil, lemongrass, chive, all sort of speak to this wine and sort of are enhanced and framed nicely by that current of sharper acid. But to me, even before the fruit in this wine, the very first hit I got was minerality. And it's sort of a combination of sort of a rockiness to it, a sort of a general minerality to it, but also an undercurrent of sort of a chalky, limestoney sort of character that's there. Not unlike you would take, for those of you who are old enough to remember, a couple of erasers when you were asked to go do the board and clap them in your mouth. And not only do you smell it, but some of it actually gets caught in your throat too. There's as much of a textural element to it as well. Nothing else going on there. You know, if there is oak, it's very low, and it would probably be very much like the wine we had before, used barrique. There is a nuttiness that comes here that, once again, I'm picking up both texturally and from a little bit of the nuances of aromatics, sort of in that kind of peanut shell, autolytic, lees contacty vein, and then just some soft notes of sort of not super toasted hazelnut, maybe a little bit of macadamias. In the mouth, the wine is zingy. It is bright. It is lean, it is sharp, but there is flesh to it as well too. So once again, it's kind of riding all of these edges perfectly. It's got tremendous length on it. I think it's more long today than it is medium plus, and the complexity on it for what it is, I think is showing just beautifully. It's a lovely glass of wine, and one that's really just expressive of what it is.
Great.
So
we're gonna show the poll.
You've got a couple of choices up here. So as you're starting to think about this, we'll go through a couple of what these varieties are. And very much the varieties that we list for you are directly correlated with the regions that they could be Old World and New World above. So it's really always a good idea that if you feel strongly that there's something speaks to you about Old World, we'll look at that and work backwards to variety at sometimes. And sometimes the grape just screams to you, and then it's a question of just connecting the dots. But Sauvignon Blanc, we talked about before, very aromatic variety, tends to ride those sort of green, herbal, grassy, alfalfa sort of notes, the wet, woolly sort of notes that you find in places like the Loire. Semillon, more often than not seen as a blend. It is both textural, but usually muted, more sort of figgier types of characters and things like that. Chardonnay can change a lot depending where you are in the world, but it's not the most expressive grape by itself. It requires a lot of the hand of the winemaker in it to bring it out. And then others, depending on what your other choices, again, depending on what you thought, may be a great thought starter for us to have some conversation from. And then again, picking your country along with your grape variety or varieties if you believe it to be a blend.
Evan, did you say anything about the alcohol?
No, I didn't, and that's a point that's worth bringing up. If you compare this wine texturally with the first wine, not only is it a little bit leaner, it doesn't feel quite as heavy in the mouth. Alcohol can be sensed in three places. Point number one is an actual heat, and there's a couple of wines down the road that might demonstrate this more. That when you actually put your nose in the glass, it sort of tickles the hairs in your nostrils, makes them jump up simply because the alcohol by volume level in the wine. The second one that most people usually pick up on first is the weight of the wine itself. An alcohol-like wine is like dairy in dairy fat, rather, I should say, in dairy products. A non-fat milk versus heavy cream, there's a lot of weight, texture, sweetness, and range as you move through that. And the same thing's true with alcohol and wine. A wine that's at, say, 7% alcohol versus a wine that's, say, 14.5% alcohol will be a lot lighter in the mouth, a lot less rich in the mouth, and also in the veins that wine is at, in the sort of range that wine is at, that extra bit of alcohol will actually enhance the ripeness and your perceived sweetness level of that wine. So based on that, this is not a super heavy alcoholic wine to me.
Great. I'm going to share the results right now. We have 63% who are in the Semillon camp, and that's exciting. And then we have about 19% in Chardonnay. I'm not seeing what other. Let's see if anyone said anything about other. No one's offered up what other. There are a few people who did pick Sauvignon Blanc. So I think talking about the differences between the three varieties and might be helpful here. And then going along with that, there are votes all across, but most of the votes are in the Old World. With about 59, almost 60% in Old World, most of it in France, and about 33% in Australia. Mm-hmm. So let's reveal the wines, and then we can talk
a little bit more. So I'm sure a lot of you are going, I don't remember a Mâcon-Villages having as much character as this one does, and we can certainly talk about that momentarily. This came up at a tasting we were doing when I did sort of a little tender, if you will, to ask my different suppliers what they had. And this wine showed up. I wasn't familiar with it at first sight, but I tasted and just became entranced, as the rest of the panel did as well too. Mâcon-Villages sits just south of the Côte du Beaune in the greater area of the Mâconnais. The wines here are sort of junior Burgundies, if you will, following the same template of grape varieties not necessarily as heralded as their friends are in the north. And Mâcon-Villages, the villages simply means that it can be made from a handful of designated villages that are known for producing the better grapes there. So if you blend more than one together, you have to say villages, but you could also put the name of a single village after it, whether it was Virey, Clos, etc. In fact, most of this comes from an area not far from Virey. Clos Saint-Pancras is the name of the wine of this particular producer. Frantz Chagnoleau is the name of a gentleman. He is married to Caroline Ghon, or his partner in life is Caroline Ghon. And Caroline Ghon is as important as the fact that her name isn't on the wine, because her thumbprints are all over this. Many of you are probably familiar with a producer named Dominique Lafont of Comte de Lafont up in Meursault, Burgundy. Caroline was the first winemaker that he hired to oversee his Héritier Comte de Lafont project that he does in the Mâcon, which was to find these wonderful vineyards in lesser expensive territories and give them the same treatment, if you will, extended lees contact, which is one of his signatures, and really bringing the wine out. So it's interesting in the sense that it is a wine that's sort of an aha discovery wine. It's a smaller appellation, masquerading as a bigger wine there, but clearly the lime, the minerality, and all of that suggests to you that you're in the older world. It is only 13% alcohol by volume, as we were talking about before, lighter in style, pretty consistent with what you find in that part of the world, but made with the hand of somebody who is looking to show the aspirational characters in both. Completely native yeast, certified organic, 30-year-old vines, and a very pronounced limestone soil base is obviously what drew these people to that place. And Monsieur Chagnoleau has a long, Chagnoleau, sorry, has a long history in this area, particularly in the Mâcon, so he knows from his Mâcon.
So Evan, Chardonnay versus Semillon versus Sauvignon Blanc.
Well, this particular Semillon, it depends on where you are in the world. And a lot of the Semillons that I saw were probably directly correlated with the Australia comment below. And if you have Australian Semillon, they tend to be leaner, they tend to be meaner, they tend to be long age-worthy wines, not unlike a great Burgundy would be, but they don't have that same character of minerality, of liminess to them, simply because in the places that happens in Australia, most notably the Hunter Valley, parts of the Margaret River, et cetera, they tend not to be as expressive terroir-wise. Semillon in the New World tends to be much fleshier than this and more sort of ripe pear and fig, as I said before. And if you blended it with Sauvignon Blanc, it would still have a different expression of green than what you're getting here. The green accents here are soft herbal backtones and not sort of olivey, alfalfa, grassy.
So Evan, there are some comments on the chat, which I love. Thank you, Tony. I love that honesty. Is this a trick wine? This feels difficult. And it's, you know, how difficult is it supposed to be to get this particular wine? And before you answer, I just want to tell those of you who did not get the first two wines, I wouldn't get this in a blind tasting. You are not expected to get this in a blind tasting. Madeline, would you get this in a blind tasting?
I would really struggle with it. And one of the reasons is, first of all, this exceptional producer, you know, this is not Mâcon, even good commercial Mâcon by anybody's measure. Also, I hate bringing up a slightly geeky term, but it's evident here. This is a wine made from the hand of someone who's being very careful about oxygen. You know, so it hasn't loosened up. It's verging on, to use the word, reductive. Don't worry about it too much, but the punchline is it's a little tight. It's showing the evidence of, you know, natural yeast and its amazing complexity and length. And it's very mouthwatering and mineral driven. I mean, I would consider Chablis if I was playing with Chardonnay because of the acidity and the minerality, but this is a lot about the producer. You know, I would have a hard time with this wine.
Is it a trick question? Is it a trick wine? And how is it not a trick wine? Because I know that we don't set out to put trick wines out there.
Well, first of all, I think a couple things. Number one, I'm going to say this again, for those of you hearing it for the first time, you're hearing it now. For those of you who heard it for our kits are not specifically created to train Jedi Knights, right? That's a great thing if you want to be here, but it's much about expanding palates, showing people interesting wines, and just getting you to grow and evolve with it there. Is this a classic Mâcon in that sense? No, not really. Is it an over-delivering Mâcon, but that gives you great pleasure? And if you look at the price tag, is an extraordinary value for the money? Absolutely. And I think that's as much why we are showing it to you. So is it a trick wine in the sense that would you ever be per se tested in whatever thing on it? Unlikely, but nevertheless, I think it's great to expand our horizons and to show people what Mâcon in the hands of a really good producer can achieve.
And the price is revealed on the reveal page, which is terrific. It's very subtle in the right-hand corner, but this is a premium quality Mâcon. And, you know, to pivot back to the Soave, this is not your average Soave. It was what, $26, $28, which speaks to the producer as well. So the price gives you an idea of where it's nestled in the larger scheme of things.
You know, the first two wines, you know, the phrase nature bats last, it's always true. The phrase about wine, the bottom line is the producer. And in the case of the first two wines, the producer was everything, because both appellations on general, they produce really serviceable wines, but then you get these all-star producers that produce wines that were almost atypical, and the reason they are is because they're so high in quality, okay? And kudos to Evan and Li Ming, because they're showing you best of examples, right? And then the other thing, when you get to the deductive part of this exercise, it's process of elimination, okay? And both of those you were offered Sauvignon Blanc and the Pyrazine green contact, it wasn't there. And with this last wine, even a Semillon blend, the green thing wasn't there. And with Australian Semillon, and we did one a couple of tastings ago, it's liquid lightsaber, much lower alcohol, much higher acid, and very, very neutral in its character. So again, process of elimination will be your best friend if it's a challenging wine. I don't know how to go into this next wine. So let's just go through it. Yeah.
Go through it like you would. I'm sorry. Go for it.
All right, so the first thing I noticed, if you look at all three white wines, it's got the deepest color. And that usually means some kind of gentle oxidation in the form of age, extended oak aging, possible extended skin contact, botrytis fruit. Okay, so again, it's setting you up for possibly seeing some kind of oxidation on the nose and palate. I'm going to call this a medium yellow. It has kind of deep gold highlights, no particles. It is bright. Okay. Going on to the nose. And the nose, again, the first thing that jumps out at me, and I guess it's the theme for the white wines, all these are really, really high quality wines and incredibly well made. So this has a whole panoply of different kinds of fruit. There's definitely citrus fruit. It's mostly sweet, but there's also tart. I would add lime to that. I like the yogurt. The yogurt here to me on the fruit is actually the Lees contact, yeah, which we're going to get to later. Tree fruit, yes, there is ripe pear and apple to it. There's also some stone fruit, and yeah, I would say some tropical fruit as well. What comes to me, this is like adult juicy fruit gum. It's got pineapple and sweet citrus. It's delicious on the nose and the palate. The floral, yes, not so much here because there's a lot of other things going secondarily. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so really no vegetative. To me, there's a little bit of ginger root that's probably from oak influence. We're going to get there in a second. For me, also honey, a little bit of verbena. There's really not much in the way of vegetative type things or herbal. Inorganic and organic earth, nothing organic in terms of dirt, but yes, there's a little salinity, as in peace and salinity, as we like to say here at Master of the World. And no animals, lots of jokes there. Oak aging, yes. So there is low to medium oak aging here, but the regimen, I think we're about 30% new wood, 70% used wood. It's French and some spices. Hazelnut, yeah, marzipan, macadamia, honey to me. I like going back to the ginger powder. And for me, a couple of perceived winemaking choices. First, malolactic, yes. And that goes, to almost like a clarified butter quality to it. And then Lees contact, which was not only the custard character, but the really richness on the mid palate of this wine. So this to me, in terms of the palate sequence, when you taste the wine, just a wonderful, cornucopia of fruit, the richness of Lees contact, a little bit of malolactic, and then the oak. Really, it's a wonderful combination. Okay, structure, residual sugar, it's fermented dry. The acid is medium plus. The alcohol is medium plus, but I think a little bit more closer to high. And here I would thinking 13.5 to 14%, definitely higher than the first two wines, which by the way, had the same stated alcohol percentage of 13. It shows you between first and second wine, dry extract and density of the first wine and how different the wine can be. The texture is round and smooth, and the finish is long, and the complexity is high. This is really, really high quality wine. Okay. For the sake of academics, let's do the conclusion.
Yeah, I think at this point, I would say, please try to look at what you thought it was before I gave you the ginormous hint of the winemaker. And you have the poll in front of you right now. Tim, you know, the choices that we've put here, we've definitely gone all over the world here with these choices. What sticks out to you here?
Okay, let's do these real quick by process of elimination. Anybody who's tempted to say, old world, you should taste wine number 2, or better yet, wine number 1, because what's missing here is a really pronounced earth and mineral quality. Okay, that's number 1. Second, Viognier is a full-on aromatic grape. So it is very perfumed and floral. Also usually has considerable phenolic bitterness, the almond skin bitterness from skin contact during fermentation, then and after. That's lacking here. And so, but Viognier, of course, can have oak, especially New World Viognier. But again, this wine's not overtly floral, and it's not phenolic on the finish. Pinot Gris and Pinot Grigio. Pinot Grigio would be much, much lighter wine than this, probably 13% alcohol and certainly no oak. And obviously the same holds true if this is Pinot Gris. You do sometimes find Pinot Gris with a little bit of oak, but not like this. The oak here is definitely married into the wine, and it's an important part of the identity. Okay, so if you rule out Old World, Italy, and France, and you should, you're going to get to the New World. Okay, and either of those choices is actually, you know, could be true.
So we'll hold right there. And someone did pick other. So if you want to jump in and tell us where you picked, if you went other, that will be an interesting thing for Tim to reveal. We're going to share the results right now. And of course, Tim, we've got 82% on Chardonnay. I think James is very famous. Lots of people know when we have James, what that means. So,
I wonder if he got his own wine, though. That would be my question.
Yeah, I started buying his wines in the early 90s. So yeah, he's kind of known.
Yeah, exactly.
Just one quick thing, and that Tim, I'll take it. But I also wanted to show, again, under the auspices of putting my my headmaster's hat on here, the whole idea of showing 2 Chardonnays in the same flight was done in juxtaposing an old world version that sort of tries to emulate sort of that newer that style, and a New World version. So again, the education element here is as important as anything else. I know those of you who are you know, taking various tests think, well, they would never put 2 of the same variety in there. But I also will let you know that some people who are taking MW studies know that oftentimes you're given 3 wines, of which, you know, they're the same. One of them's got slightly different, and why. Tests like this are a good way to explore the same grape in 2 different interpretations.
Yeah, Andrew, will you flip to the next slide, please? Thank you.
Yeah, can I just say that, you know, especially for those of us who are in the position of buyers, or, you know, you're tasting a lot of wines, we need to keep it in the back of our mind to return to classics like this wine, just because we need to keep current on them, but also we forget the delicious factor, you know. And that's the first thing that occurred to me this morning when I tried this a couple hours ago, is that it's just a delicious wine, that the balance of everything that's put in it is really spot on.
And to that point, Tim, I mean, if you want to show a teaching example of how California Chardonnay can have integrated oak used with a very light touch, cha-ching, you know, because it doesn't command your attention by anybody's measure. It's, you know, melted into the wine just right.
Yeah. And I love to hear from the folks in the audience, if, as you compare the 2 wines, and I really do hope you have 6 glasses in front of you, or at least 3 glasses to taste all 3 wines at the same time, because the back and forth comparison is, for me at least, what's helping to teach me on what is less oak, what is more oak, what's higher acid, what's lower acid, you know. And in this case, going between Old World and New World Chardonnay, it would be interesting if anyone dares to venture and let us know, what did you think of Old World versus New World Chardonnay? There's been a lot of Chardonnay bashing over the years, and love to hear when we put 2 Chardonnays, sometimes it feels a little risky to me, maybe not to Evan. And I go, well, will people hate us for putting 2 Chardonnays because so many people hate Chardonnays out there? But in this case, I'd love to hear what you guys thought of these Chardonnays.
This is also, by the way, if you were to look at, here 3 wines, what's the similar thread? This is a great study in least contact across the 3 of them, each of them using it in a different way, and it being a vital element of all 3 of the wines, using different terroirs, and in one case, a completely different grape.
Great comment.
Great. If there are no other comments, we will go to the next. Oh, Old World Chardonnay may be easier to enjoy. Elegant. What do you guys think?
It depends on your palate. Really does.
I think that California Chardonnay would just melt into a lot of sauces, and you wouldn't know where the food left off and the wine began, especially if we're using the B word, butter, right?
Yep.
Or creamy sauces, or, preparations that have a little bit of fat and weight to them. I think it'd be a fabulous juxtaposition.
Yeah, I love it. And, part of blind tasting, to Tony's comment, is a lot of people tell us, I hate X, and yet when I tried your X, I loved it. And chances are they don't actually hate X. Chances are they actually like it, just haven't had. And I love what Manon is saying too. Not a huge fan of Chardonnay, but love this. And part of it is, I think, exposure.
Yep.
So, Tim, I think we're ready for the next wine. This time, I'm not going to mention any winemaker names.
All right, and now for something completely different, as they say on TV. Okay, everybody, taking glass number 4. As you look at it, the first thing that occurs to me is evolution of color, right? So the first 3 wines that we tasted were relatively young. This is not. This wine, is garnet in color. Even the edge is a lighter, rose garnet, and dare I say it, dare, salmon. Okay, so this is a wine with some age, which sets up instant expectations for me in terms of fruit quality and also structure, and also the wine being dominated by non-fruit savory type things. Let's see if those holds true. Okay, and then on the nose, so it is, it is really tart, fruit dominated, red fruit dominated. So I'm saying, things like, cranberry, red raspberry, for me, rhubarb, little pomegranate. Those aren't on there, but that's what I smell. They're ripe, but to me, they're dried. It's like craisins that you give your kids in school lunches. There is a touch of black fruit here. To me, it's again dried. I would go in the blackberry range because that still has elevated acidity. And the wine has a lot of lift. I'm going to get to that in a second. There's a reason why. I like the tangerine citrus fruit call. This reminds me of dried orange and tangerine peel. Stone fruit, no. And there's a hibiscus, almost vitamin C character, rose petal dried character to it as well. Okay, it's a really complex nose because we're still getting to a lot more. Next slide, please. Okay. So now, to me, we're getting to really the main act of the wine, and that's the secondary stuff. There are dried leafy type greens. I like the arugula call. Mushrooms, both white and brown for me. There's star anise. It's very bright. And there's a dry tomatoey quality to it as well. And look, there's the rhubarb. Okay. Yes, herbal. Red licorice, which to me connects right to the star anise quality. There is both inorganic and organic earth. There is a really dusty clay, but more dust than anything, and then a pronounced almost chalkiness, but just a really pronounced minerality. Animal, yes, for a couple of reasons. One, overall age, but there could be a tiny bit of Brettanomyces. I don't see it here, but there could be. Oak aging is yes, but it's low, and here we're talking about large barrels. And they make themselves known in oxidative form with almond and marzipan, and even to me, walnut skins. There's a little bit of bitterness. If anything, there's a couple of things going on here. There's, to me, quite a pronounced VA, volatile acidity. If you put your nose in the glass, it almost smells like a quick whiff of balsamic vinegar. So there's a lot of VA lift. And let me just say that here, I don't consider this a flaw. I would hope for those of you that are on the Jedi path will read Jamie Good's book that's called Flawless. And it's about what are considered wine faults, because he says, and I agree with him, that most of what we consider faults are contextual. And here, to me, VA in this wine is a really important part of its style. And the oxidation, of course, this wine has seen some age, right? Winemaking choices, yeah, there's some stem inclusion and partial whole cluster. There's some hard stem tannins in the mid palate. And then on to the structure, this wine is bone dry. The acid is, yeah, probably high. I'm bordering on medium plus to high, somewhere in between. The alcohol is medium, it's restrained. So this, to me, is temperate climate wine, whatever it is. The tannins are medium plus, and there's quite a bit of them, but I think here age has really softened a lot of the tannic texture of it, and definitely a lean tart finish. And the finish to me is long, and the complexity with everything we've just thrown out there is high. This is pretty interesting wine, very intriguing. I think for me, the main thing is it's profoundly earthy. So I'm not going anywhere near the New World, but also the structure to me is very curious. And the age of the wine that we're tasting it at really means some things as well. Okay, Li Meng, on to the scorecard.
Great. So
Okay.
we have these varieties up here, Pinot Noir, Barbera, Baga. And if anything feels foreign to you, we will definitely talk about it. Tim, we're not asking the question on age, and you've pointed to it. Again, can you summarize for us, what are the things that point to an older aged wine as people are filling up?
Okay, well, I mean, starting with the color is garnet. So it's not purple or red, right? And even the rim at the edge, it's even more of an advanced color, which it will always be. And then on the nose, everything I talked about, the fruit is dry, right? And then there's leather, and there's a lot of savory type characters. And even on the palate, the wine is, it tastes tart, fruit quality wise, but the fruit is dried. So everything about the dried, even the herbs and the spices and everything is dried. There's nothing fresh to it. And that's all signs of age. There's a joke there somewhere. Okay. All right. So should we let them tabulate their scores and then talk about the process of elimination?
We'll give it about 10 more seconds, guys. So get your last answers in. I will tell you that they're in the front running right now as I'm looking at the results coming in, and we'll share that in 5 seconds, is Barbera. So because of the Barbera and because of the comments about Old World, I think that people are very firmly 70% in Barbera, at least right now, and 70% in Italy. So we're going to end the poll and we're going to share this. And here we have it.
All right. So this is, if I can just start at the top, Pinot Noir, this is not Pinot Noir. It would be Pinot Noir as an evil dwarf. It's too acidic and too tannic, and it's not nice, okay? Barbera possible, but I want you to consider this. There's really still 2 paradigms for Barbera here, even though in the last 10 years, the wines have moved and become very modern in style, so that the fruit is really polished. The acid is still high, but it is rare that you come across Barbera that's this tannic, right? Even for this wine's age. Baga, on the other hand, we don't get to taste very often. And Evan and I were joking about this. This Baga, when it's young, is kind of like a middle linebacker. It's not really subtle, right? It's usually very tannic. It's aggressively tannic, like Nebbiolo, and profoundly earthy. And at the same time, it has elevated acidity. My only problem is taking this to Barbera. It's just too tannic, especially for its age. It's still too tannic. Okay. Hopefully everybody, after I kind of tipped it, didn't go to the New World with this, but you're somewhere in the Old World. All right. So let's do the big reveal.
And we do have, yes, it's Baga. It's from Portugal. And I do want to just point out that if you were using our grid before today, we do have an error in our grid that is not pointing to Bairrada, which is where Baga is found in Portugal. And we are making that correction. Oftentimes our selections and our desire to show something fun is before our tech is. And so I will make that correction right off the bat. But Tim, we did have a question about tomato leaf being pointing out to Sangiovese. So, as we are revealing this as Baga, why not Sangiovese also?
Hi, Luca in Italy. Thanks for weighing in. Tomato leaf equals Sangiovese. Absolutely agree. For me, even more with wines like Chianti Classico and Chianti. And maybe not so much Brunello because they tend to be so much older by the time you get to them. I think, Luca, the challenge here is that you just can't take one fruit savory type thing and go home with it. You have to, for me, you know, there are important non-fruit type markers, and certainly that would be one of them, but the structure of here is just different from Barbera, and you would probably agree. The other style of Barbera is certainly old school, which is very similar to this wine, but it's just not as tannic. But that's a great comment. Okay. All right.
There was a question here with what is Baga? A little bit more on that varietal. I don't know if, you know, Tim, you want to go there, or Evan?
Evan, why don't you take this one?
Sure, Baga is a fun grape. Some people pronounce it Baga just because it's such a difficult grape to make well and to do well. But it is the signature grape of Bairrada, which is the more coastal part of an area that some people in Portugal might know of called Dão, D-A-O. And it's a grape that, as Tim pointed out very appropriately, when it's mean, it's not only like a linebacker, but it would be like Dick Butkus on steroids. I mean, it was like, kind of like sack the quarterback. But here you put it in a tutu by putting 9 years of age on it and sort of softening out some of the edges. That tannin is always going to be there. It's a grape that ages, as you can see here, gracefully, and dare I say, in an elegant style. In Campolargo, Carlos makes a very elegant style here. Tends to have characteristics of Pinot Noir, which is why we threw that up there as a choice. There is that sort of elegant fruit character there. But again, even within that, the harder tannins at the back, softened and polished over time, would probably take you away from that.
I'm going to jump in on that, Evan, because for those of you who did vote for Pinot and are wincing because it's not, you know, sometimes the mouthfeel, the structure, and the color will set you free. But especially in this particular case, the tannins are just too drying. You know, it's quite that simple. And I've got to tell you, in case you're sitting there going, how many Bagas have these people had? I've had like 2.5, maybe, you know, thanks to Evan. So, you know, that said, my takeaway, I loved when Tim said that it's savory. I would add the word exotic. I couldn't place it. I don't even know deductively what I would do with it. But I also love that you know, tangerine, earthiness, and like spice, like cloves. It's way out there, but it's delicious and intriguing. And I think this is given to us as a present by MTW to be able to assess something that would be very hard to place deductively.
Yeah, and thank you, Madeline. And if there were, for lack of better words, a theme to this kit, if you will, within its international structure, it would really be discovery. Discovery in the sense that you've got, you know, a Baga, which a lot of people don't know, although more people should, and is a grape that is undervalued and underappreciated. And the fact that this is a 2013 vintage and the retail price on it, if you can find it, is $25. There's not a lot of it out there. But even the Garganega, you know, a lot of people have had Suave that was underwhelming to them, and to see that it can achieve these levels of greatness. Same thing, a Mâcon that's achieving a level, stepping over, punching its weight by a long shot. And then once again, discovery in placing a California Chardonnay of the highest caliber against a really good, again, French Chardonnay, admittedly a smaller appellation, but of the highest caliber. All is about discovery.
Bottle age and value. You're going to have to go outlier to get it, right? You know, you're not going to.
We have to keep moving, but I do want to address this one question from Mel. Is it worth $25?
Can I, hey Mel, just, you know, since this was my wine, I was looking at pricing on winesearcher.com. You can find this for as little as $16 or $17. Wow. So, you know, again, we give you suggested retail. Odds are that you can find some of the wines, not all, for less.
But I think, Evan, our point is that the value of this wine we saw is there, and everybody's going to be a bit different.
Yeah, no, I think for the scarcity, the rareness of it, the absolute pristine expression of what it is, and the fact that somebody had to cellar it and carry the inventory and all that, I think it's worth significantly more than that. I've had enough experience tasting Baga from enough producers and spent a chunk of time in Bairrada to have the greatest of admiration for this particular producer, and then to have one that's got some age on it, I think is a personal treat. I respect if somebody's not going to be enamored with it, but it's an absolutely lovely example of one.
No, and I love our community being very honest with us, and it's definitely something for us to take into consideration. Definitely some new stuff in here. Now, wine number 5, I think we're going back to you, Madeline.
Nope, 5 is
nope, me. That's Evan.
5 is Evan. Okay, yeah. So again, an interesting juxtaposition if you're going off of 4 and coming to 5. Big differences in this wine right off the bat in terms of its appearance. This wine has got much deeper color, much richer color, and to follow up on what Tim was saying, a much more youthful color. It's sort of your classic ruby with a ruby rim, but obviously with a greater level of intensity, more of a medium, not so light, and not showing any of those elements of age that we saw in the wine that we just came off of. Today, for me, this is more speaking of black fruit than it was at red fruit. I do remember tasting it before and the red fruit coming out, but today it's really more about the black cherries, it's more about the black raspberries, about the plums, red and black plums there. And if you are having red fruit here, it's really more on that sort of super ripe, almost pie level of blackberry pie, of raspberry pie, red cherry pie fruit, and not so. And that's not a pejorative, by the way, just that sort of super richness to it. And really that, but to me, very much about black fruit today. Some very soft florals. They're there. They're pronounced. Not as evident to me as the fruit is today, but definitely there. Then as you move into the non-fruit things, which are, I think, equally as interesting here, you're going to get a whole combination of elements that are really about, if we could have the next slide, really as much about place and great variety as it is anything else. So here I point out that while the fruit is a significant part of the personality of this wine, some of those other elements and the more herbal and even, dare I say, vegetative elements that are there, not in a negative way again, stand out to me. Some of those leafy greens, some of those red and yellow peppers, that fennel-y sort of character, that licorice note that's there. Sage, very strong, a little bit of tobacco leaf, a little bit of tea leaf as well, and then just some soft spices. Those other spices that you see sort of dig in and lean in hard to, again, a big sense of the place of oak here in this wine. Don't find a significant amount of earthiness here, either organic or inorganic, which is, again, neither here nor there, it just is, but it also leads me to start thinking about how that's going to present itself in terms of what we learned over time, old world v new world. But there is a very deft amount of oak placed here. I put it in sort of a medium intensity with all those sort of sweet baking spice notes, the cinnamon notes, and all those other elements that are there too. That comes off in the sense of nuts, both a little bit like beautiful fresh walnuts or even black walnuts that are there. And then nothing super dominant on the winemaking or perceived winemaking choices. Texturally, the wine is smooth and succulent. The tannins are not overly aggressive. They're there, they're present, but I think in personality, both vis-a-vis grape as well as terroir, they're completely apropos here. The acid is in lovely balance. And the wine has got lovely length, and it speaks of older vines. Just the depth and the intensity of it speaks of vines to me right off the bat that are older. But the things that are striking me, the three sort of takeaway points I have, are these sort of interesting herbal elements here. The fact that a wine of such generosity is not ripping my mouth apart in terms of tannin, and again, sort of the very pronounced fruit character and this nice framing of very deftly used, but nevertheless present oak on the wine.
Evan, as we're pulling out the poll here, we did have a good question on from Chai about inorganic versus organic earth. What is the difference between the two? And can you illustrate that with this particular wine?
Yeah, organic earth is going to be things that are alive. So that would be the potting soil that you use in your yard. It would be turning over the dirt that's in your backyard. It would be the humus that accumulates in a cooler, darker area, or the forest floor and the mushrooms that are popping up as you walk through Golden Gate Park, where I live, on a day just a few days after the event. So everything's sort of living and breathing, if you will. Inorganic earth would be more things like rocks. It could be anything from slate to schist in the case of Portugal, to minerals, to limestone, to volcanic soils that have been made over time, decomposing rock that turns itself into earth, pebbles, larger stones, etc. So those would be inorganic. And generally where you see them, it's not like you're going to see one more than the other, but oftentimes we associate more inorganic earth with lower expressions of fruit, and the inorganic earth pops up, and those generally tend to be associated more with old world areas. But that's not to say, as we've seen today and we've seen in other kits in the past, that you can't find inorganic earth in new world wines. But generally, you'll find a lot more just sort of really strong, pronounced living earth character. One, you can find it, by the way, in a lot of sustainable biodynamic vineyards, and two, you're going to find it in a lot of new world territories.
it's a mixed bag across the top 3 varieties here, from Merlot to Malbec to
Yeah.
Syrah. What kind
And
of
just a quick clarifier here, just for everybody, particularly those of you who are just joining us for the first time. When we put a grape and we put a blend, it doesn't necessarily mean the wine is purely blended. But oftentimes we know that when you look at the label and a varietal is called out, it might have upwards to 15, 20+% of another grape blended into it. We often blend Merlot into Cabernet to soften the tannins and add complexity. We might blend other grapes with Syrah, like Grenache or stuff like that, to again soften it up there. Having said that, any one of those lead grapes could also be in a pure form.
Great. All right, I'm going to share the poll right now. So we've got about 48% of folks thinking that it's Merlot, 20% and 24% about even for Malbec and Syrah. So I think you need to explain how it's landing in those 3 pockets. We have some other, be curious to see what other is in chat. And then in terms of regions, 44% in Old World and about 56% in New World. So I'd say that's pretty evenly spread. So how would we decipher between old and new? We can show.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Show what it is. I was to say we could before we lead in, just a couple of thoughts on that. Clearly the Merlots have it, and I think that that's a really reasonable assessment based on the generosity of fruit and the very approachable structure of the wine vis-a-vis tannin, and the sort of juiciness and succulence of the nature of that fruit, all framed with some nice oak around it. Malbec is an interesting call, but Malbec would be doubly opaque in color by and large, and would have a much more pronounced floral component, particularly if you were thinking of Argentinian Malbec, which is literally, like crushing up a bunch of violets and throwing them in a glass of wine and having it jump out to you. The floral element here, I mentioned it earlier, but it's not so much pronounced, but you are getting more of the herbal elements here, which could be part and parcel of other varieties, including the Merlot we talked about earlier. Syrah is an interesting call. The tannins would probably be a bit grippier, and in a warm climate, even still, you would probably have stronger spice notes that were not directly related to the oak itself, but more related to the Syrah variety, a little bit peppery, whether it was stronger green peppercorn than one we're able to pick up here, or cracked white and black pepper, and a meatiness that just is simply not here. It's like a charcuterie saucisson type character that we're not getting at all.
Great. Let's reveal what it is.
Okay. So this is to me a great benchmark of not only the variety, but the variety appellation blend here, which is Alexander Valley with Merlot. Alexander Valley Vineyards, which happens to be the namesake winery within the appellation itself, is just a fabulous winery. It's been around for decades and making good wine for decades. And for me, when I'm trying to explain Merlot to people, this to me is a great example of what the variety is all about, how it expresses itself. They've been producing it since the mid-'80s, and a consistently good job. Because of that, obviously they have older vines to work with too. And I mentioned earlier that this wine has that sort of propensity to demonstrate the depth that you get with older vine character that's there. There is a nice use of enhancing the fruit's quality and the fruit's ripeness with the oak, but not doing it too much and over the top. And I don't think you could get a more classic example. It's 100% pure Merlot. And I think that although you could probably add some other varieties here, it speaks with a very singular voice. It speaks as a soloist and not as even a duet, much less a choir. So really there is sort of that absolute singularity of varietal expression, which once again, I think is not only a wonderful grape demonstrating itself in Alexander Valley, but also demonstrating itself as a variety itself.
Your point to monovarietal is really poignant, Evan. And I think when you just putting your nose in the glass, I just did it right now, you have this wonderful waft of red berries with herbs and integrated oak, and no minerality worth talking about, a little bit of dustiness. But I mean, I really think it's a great expression if you wanted to play with this wine, if you hold on to it over a couple, 3 days of California Merlot from a region that's known for it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And just a quick point, Tony, I'm seeing your comment right there, and you're absolutely right. If we were in Europe, a couple of things. Number one, I think we would see probably a greater expression of terroir, most specifically through inorganic earth, be it graphite, be it cedary, cigar boxy stuff, all of those other elements. And more importantly, it would probably be blended, which would give you different facets of the fruit. The French in Bordeaux, trust me, are not sitting around worrying about whether they can label the wine varietally for the American market. They make the wine they do, and they do it the way they do. And it doesn't have the profile of a wine that had Cab Franc in it or even Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yeah, and I think it's really a little overwhelming. We've definitely debated, a lot in our company about whether or not to do the slash blend thing. And we landed on the side of doing slash blend because if we started to do Merlot and then Bordeaux blend and everything, the number of options would just balloon. So we've really tried to limit the number of options because as it is, this is a very complicated game of guessing. So yes, when we say Merlot slash blend, sometimes it's 100%, especially when it's New World like this. And then sometimes if it's Old World, it's often blended as well. Okay, so I think that we're going to go to wine number 6.
Yay, okay, that's me. I'm the caboose. So I've been playing with this so I wouldn't have to slurp in front of you, which some of my colleagues tell me is tacky. But, again, overview wise on the color, ask yourself simple questions. Put your finger underneath it. Is it opaque or translucent? It's not a stupid question because we talked about Malbec a moment ago being, inky. This is just a really beautiful, true ruby red, and it lightens to the same hue to the rim. So it's not displaying a whole lot of bottle age, if any, but I can see my finger through it. I can't read text, but we're talking broad strokes, thin skin grape varieties, thick skin grape varieties, somewhere in between. So that point moving to the fruit, I tell you, overview wise, just from the nose, I just get a big smile when I put my nose in this glass. Red fruit, verging on jammy in a good way. It is not confected or, candied. Earth, it's all about dust mixed with some beautiful dried leaves, maybe. It's open. Maybe there's a little bottle age on it, even though it, the color's not telling me that. And a little bit of heat, and that's on the palate as well, but in a good way. It gives the wine some heft. And, alcohol is not a satanic thing, to have a little bit of elevated alcohol in wine. Some people are really like, almost maniacal about looking at the number. First of all, the number has wiggle room. And secondly, if the alcohol works in the largest scope of the wine, it's one element of it. So that said, I'm going to define the black fruit a little bit, but I mean, take your pick. I would add plums to this too. Red. No, there's the plum. Sorry, wasn't staring at the grid. And as I said, a combination of perfectly ripe, verging on overripe, and a little bit of jam. There's a touch of black fruit in this. It's lurking, but it doesn't pull the wine. It's not the dominant factor in the wine. Again, a little bit of dried fruit in here. I'd go with the black fig and plum. Skip on down to floral. Once you get the elements that I mentioned were dominant to me out of the way, there's absolutely a florality to this wine, but it's potpourri-esque. It's a little bit of that mixed little basket of dried flowers. Next panel. Are we there? Yep. I have to learn how to do that, Li Meng. I don't know how to do that cool open thing.
And just driving for us.
I'm just going to go down to herbs on this one because that's what's really speaking to me. I think tea leaf would be a good caller. Again, that, Garrigue, Provençal, bay leaf, the one where we decide to put 1 leaf or 5 in a soup or a stew, but it's got that element to it. And licorice for sure, red or black, I will say peppercorn is really speaking to me in this, both green and black, which is not mentioned. Not in a way of heat, but a smell. It's not primary, but I don't have to fight for it. It's speaking to me. If you flip on down, I don't really get a whole lot of animal elements in this. Certainly not Brettanomyces. Somebody could make a case for bloody sanguine especially, but I don't think it's speaking to what it is. Blended oak for sure. You know, there's no vanilla, Starbucks, baking spices business going on here, but you know, it's not an absence of oak, to use a double negative. You know, there's enough wood on this wine to have loosened it up a little bit. So I would imagine a combination of smaller and larger used barrels. There's an oxidative character to this wine. It's not oxidized, but it's got, it speaks to maybe a little bit of bottle age. And that's where the nuttiness comes in. Winemaking choices, I love the option of stem inclusion because there's a bitterness that's not just tannin. I think, you know, overview wise, this is balanced, showy, and it's got a lot of earth elements and ripe red fruit and some dried herbs. So going to structure, acidity is, you know, medium plus for sure. I don't know where the high came in there. You know, it's not pulling my attention. Alcohol, medium plus to high, you know, it's there. I feel it in my chest, but it works. Tannin, medium plus, but not enough in terms of the quality of the tannin. It's not drying enough to shut the flavor down. You can taste through it very easily. So gritty and astringent, yes, but in a very well-mannered way. I would make a comment that it is long, actually, and it's actually, you know, quite complex. A combination of earth, quality of fruit, and a little bit of bottle age. Really neat wine. Like it a lot. So let's flip to our deduction panel. I love this one. And again, hopefully you've relaxed enough to realize this isn't a tense game. It's a fun game, right? So we're staring at this, and the thing that occurs to me with our beautiful options here, you know, blend. So, you know, you ask yourself the question, is it a monovarietal or is it possibly a blend? You know, don't agonize over it. But Cabernet Sauvignon and Touriga Nacional, I will say, in my experience, tend to be, you know, have a lot of black fruit to them. Doesn't mean that this couldn't be that, but, you know, overview wise, and also they tend to be opaque, especially in their youth. They do have a very, you know, Touriga especially, aka Douro Touriga dominant blends have a strong florality to them, not unlike Malbec. Grenache, very interesting option because you've got a wine that, you know, if it's Grenache dominant, that is a thinner skinned grape variety. But if you put a chunk of Syrah or Mourvèdre in there, it can change the color and it can inch closer to black fruit and change the mouthfeel in terms of the tannin level. Regions, there you go. Portugal, Touriga, France and California and Washington State could all be used for Cabernet Sauvignon. And Grenache could be used, well, certainly for California or Southern Rhone for France. And one thing we don't have up here, but if it's a Grenache dominant blend, certainly Australia, South Australia comes to mind. A very cool response here, Lee.
Yeah, so let me just summarize the results so that the people in the recording will have it too. 76% are Grenache, about 20% Touriga, and 5% Cabernet. And then for region, we have Old World Portugal, 19%, and dominantly Old World France at 57%. Grenache, of course, is made in a lot of different places. And in the New World, we have 5% in California and 19% in Washington. So where do you want to go? Do you want to go reveal? Or you want to talk a little bit about?
I think we should reveal because I think actually of all the wines we've had today, this and the previous wine are, you know, if you want to use the word classic in a good sense, meaning really good examples of one, what one would expect from a premium version of this wine. So let's go ahead and reveal. And this is, you tip down, get past that really cunning label and go down to the bottom name. It is Costière de Nîmes, which we're talking about, you know, the southernmost expression of the Côte du Rhône, actually disconnected from the Delta. You know, it's actually the southwesternmost portion of the Rhône Delta. It's a very cool place. I've been lucky enough to visit because you get, you know, pebbles, not quite as big as galets, but they, you know, they're called grès or graisse, and they, you know, they cover the vineyards. This is a wonderful producer. and Domaine Gassier. And this, FYI, is they claim 55% Grenache, but note to self, the law says it's got to be at least 60. But hey, who's looking? And it also is a point to that what percentages are claimed and what they actually are not necessarily the same things. Significant chunk of Syrah, 25% Syrah, with 10% Mourvèdre, a little Carignan and Cinsault. So they're using all five red varietals. The takeaways on how this is made, first of all, 16 is a terrific vintage. So it wasn't born yesterday. You have a little bit of bottle age. It is using a combination of concrete and 2 to 3 year old French oak. What else to tell you about it in terms of how it's made? I think that's it. I think we should look at it in terms of what makes it what it is. Certainly, both Grenache and Syrah to me can display a combination of white and black pepper. I don't think it's showing any meatiness to me, at least to me in this tasting. Tim or Evan might disagree, which would speak to the Syrah. But you're talking about a blend which is moderating the inclination of Grenache to be dominantly red, and also to have a spike in alcohol. I think the florality of this wine is a reflection of the terrific producer and specifically the growing region. I think it's a really beautiful Grenache-based blend. I'm surprised it's got that much Syrah in it, because I don't get at this tasting that much black fruit. And I don't think it's altered the structure as much as I would expect 25% Syrah. Tim or Evan, you want to weigh in on that?
I was just going to say, no, I was just going to say, Costille de Nîmes is sort of an interesting area that it's although for lack of better words, technically sitting in the Côte-du-Rhône in the very western part, it's theoretically the gateway to Midi. I mean, you are basically in the Languedoc, and it has characteristics for a lot of people that if you're familiar with the quality wines coming out of the Languedoc area, they're more reminiscent of that and not exactly in the classic Southern Rhône, Côte du Rhône vein. And part of that is a change of terroir, part of that's altitude, part of that's proximity to the water as you move further south, but it has a very unique character. It's a very under the radar area. Once again, theme of discovery.
$18. I just saw the price actually.
Yeah, it's heroic wine.
Wow.
It really is.
I'm going to throw out two questions. One is, do you consider this a GSM, so Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre, when it has all 5 varieties? And then the second question is, what exactly, when we say floral, are you meaning by floral?
It smells like flowers.
I'll speak to the florality for a moment. The floral sense, or something that once you get other elements out of the way as you're tasting, you perceive, define, and then it moves away so your brain and your senses can pick up another character. It's not uncommon in red wine. It can be very strong, like Evan said, like you crushed a bunch of flowers and dumped them in a glass for a Malbec. But in the case of a wine like this, it's sort of a backstory. It doesn't necessarily tell the tale in terms of deducing what it is. It's just an element. It adds complexity. And GSM, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre, plus. I think that works for me.
Exactly, and GSM would be literally in the percentage. There's mostly Grenache, followed by Syrah, followed by Mourvèdre. If you had more Mourvèdre than Syrah, it would actually be a GMS or an SGM. There was more Syrah than anything else.
Did you see the comment from Joanna Breslin, who is one of
I did not.
my colleagues from Chicago? Michel Gassier was instrumental in getting Costille de Nîmes reassigned to the Rhône. Thank you for that, Joanna.
Yeah.
And he's certainly a leader in the area.
Absolutely.
So we're going to go on now to the last page, and I just want to make some announcements. Please do join us for March 31st. This is the link for you to sign up for that. And of course, when we send out the recording, we will also include this link on there, tinyurl.com /MTW Pairings 2021. Evan is going to go through food and wine. There will be a quick primer on food and wine pairing, but you can bring your wines. You can bring 115A, other wines, whatever you have, to come taste with us, because we're going to talk specifically about food and wine pairing, some of the key fundamentals in food and wine pairing. Anything to add there, Evan?
No, it'll be fun. It'll be a lot about theory. And then we can talk about specific application. Will be some helpful hints about how to just dissect food and wine back and forth if you're starting with your wine, if you're starting with your food. But it's a lot of really good, useful theory. And again, the thing that's important to remember about food and wine as we jump in is that it's all guidelines. There's very few hard rules, and it's important to get you comfortable with moving and being confident in yourself and your own pairings.
Yeah, and it's free to attend. So you don't have to buy a kit to attend. You could just come. In fact, I'm going to tell Evan right now that I am preparing a fun challenge, Evan, a blind challenge for you. I will have a dish that I'm going to ask you to pair for me on that call. And I highly encourage people to do that, because it will be at 4 p.m. Pacific, which is 7 p.m. Eastern. So if you're eating, and you want to have some fun, come on. Evan, you can take a challenge.
Oh yeah, Tim and Madeline are going, better you than me, Evan.
I'm going to be there, Evan.
So for those of you who want to join us, this is in addition. And we're definitely going to put it out there for those. If you have friends who haven't opened their 115, they can certainly taste that with us as well. But it's not going to be the same kind of seminar like today, where, and in fact, if you want to take some pictures of what you're doing right now with the leftover wines, have some fun with that and share that with us on the 31st. The next webinar for 116A that will start shipping for those of you before the end of the month. The next monthly webinar is 116A, and that's going to be on April 14th. And I know the long-awaited WS Wine and Spirits Top 100, we are going to put out the product page for that probably at the latest Monday, but hopefully Friday even. It's going to be 6 California Pinots, 6 Oregon Pinots. There will be 2 webinars with the editors at Wine and Spirits magazine. And if you purchase this, we will also include a 3-month subscription to Wine and Spirits magazine, one of the best high integrity wine magazines that we love out there in the wine world. So without further ado, I want to say thank you to our panelists. We are going to stay here for the next happy half hour, if you will. And I will give you guys the opportunity to turn on your videos. And if you are leaving us, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and we hope you'll join us next month as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.